as the Sunshine State, is famous for its gorgeous beaches, exciting theme parks, outlet malls, and of course, its main attraction, Disney World, the place people have named the happiest place on earth. But aside from the white sandy beaches and beautiful Disney lights, lies another main attraction which puts Florida on the map as one of the largest hubs in the world for the sex industry. Tampa Bay alone has more registered adult businesses than any other city in the US per capita, and Florida is ranked number 3 for human trafficking. Human trafficking is the second largest global organized crime today. 70% of females who are trafficked into the commercial sex industry, which brings in over $27.8 billion a year nationwide, not including the entire human trafficking organization, which brings in a lot more. The sex industry has many faces, some including the porn scene, strip clubs, escort services, massage parlors, and pimps working on the street. So I decided to meet up with Krista Hernandez, founder of Loving You Where You're At, to see how she and her team are making a difference in the lives of so many in these places. Well, Krista and Glenn, I am excited to get this opportunity to talk to you about Loving You Where You're At. And Krista, I want to start off by asking you, can you share a little bit about Loving You Where You're At, and what do you do and what's your message?
Sure. So we are a survivor-led, faith-based outreach and support group to women in the commercial sex industry, as well as victims of sex trafficking. You can't very well go into the strip clubs and the brothels without running into women who are being sex trafficked as well. So right now we go into 11 strip clubs across the greater Tampa Bay area and 3 brothels, taking in the reminding message that they are loved, valued, and purposed. We always have that on the card that we take in. Actually, this is what we actually take in. So on the card, it has that message, and then it also has our contact information. And so we'll always take in just a little cute gift. So this time it happened to be some lemon spa grass, like lotion and body scrub. So we always go in with a gift and the card, and we just really go in there and love the girls. We go in and reach them by going into the places they are working and building intentional relationships with no strings attached. We restore them by going in and just bringing hope and just letting Jesus shine through us and helping them to start healing emotionally and spiritually. And then we will equip them by helping them with tangible and intangible needs. And we help them regardless whether they stay in the industry or whether they're ready to get out of the industry. We've also started 2 drop-in centers, one in Pasco and one in Tampa. And these are places where they can come in and really just talk to us if they're having a bad day or a good day. If they need resources, we will try and help them out with those resources. If we can't, then we can connect them with community resources. So we are building partnerships in the community as far as like companies that will employ them, or a cosmetology school if that's what their dream is. So, and then we also have a survivor-led support group that we offer at the drop-in centers, and that is led by me. So. And then we have a future dream to have a transitional home for these girls, because we see that's what the biggest need is. These precious women want out sometimes, but there's just nowhere for them to go. So that's what we're about.
Wow, that is amazing. So how did it get started?
From my own past. So I was in this industry for 20 years. I'll just give you a brief bit of my childhood, because we find that 60 to 90% of women who are in this industry have been sexually abused as children. No little girl dreams of growing up and saying, hey, I want to be sexually exploited. Something goes terribly wrong along the way. So for me, I came from a broken home. My parents separated at about 5 years old. My mom was not in my life very much. My father ended up getting custody of my siblings and I. We ended up living with my father, and my father would basically spiritually abuse us, physically abuse us. He would mentally abuse us. Some of the physical abuse that we endured were stun guns being used on us. I would watch him chain my siblings to their bed to where they could only get to the bathroom. He would drink Southern Comfort and always have soda, and we weren't allowed to have soda. We could have like the evaporated powdered milk from the government. So he would put something in the soda to see who was drinking his soda that would make us vomit. It got really bad and out of control. He would even record our phone calls to where we weren't allowed to speak to our mother, and he would know if we were speaking to her. I got caught, taking the device and going backwards on it because I had spoken to my mom, and he actually found out that I had done that, and he slapped me to the ground so hard that I ended up having such bad bruising on my face that I couldn't go to school. And he put hamburger meat on my face, saying that that would make the bruising go away faster. By spiritual abuse, he would have seances in the home. He would start taking me to these groups where people would channel spirits through their body, including my father. I was terrified of the house we lived in where all this was going on, and he even had me thrown in a mental hospital at 10 years old because I wouldn't stop crying and was so afraid. And he had me somehow put with the adults, not the kids, because that would be too much fun. Around this same age, 10 years old, I was sexually abused by a summer recreation worker at my elementary school, and this guy ended up getting away with it. As well as when I was in the hospital, that doctor sent me back to my father. So I was beginning to think there was nobody that I could trust and there was no safe place. Child Protective Services was called on my father, and he ended up taking us to South Carolina. Back then, they couldn't cross state lines like they can now. So to South Carolina we went. There, the abuse took on much different forms, or many different forms. We were actually in a home where porn was made easily accessible to my siblings and I. And the sad thing is that was my normal. That was the father that I knew. There was sexual abuse that was happening in that home as well. I had gotten in trouble again, and I was terrified of what he might do because it felt like life or death. And he sent me on a train at 16 years old to my mother's with garbage bags. I got off that train, my mom was not there, and here I am, 16, dragging my garbage bags. Long story short, he never had called my mom. And there was a couple that was there that I believe were angels sent by God. We didn't have an address for my mom's house, but they offered to help me, and they ended up somehow getting me directly to my mom's. Life at my mom's was much different. I was looking for acceptance in all the wrong ways, became very promiscuous. And then we will fast forward from there to 18 years old. My father was back living in Florida. And he had a connection with someone who ran a bar. And I went to that bar, and they would have dancers come in one night of the week, and they were short ones, so they asked me to fill in. And I went ahead and said yes, and I was dancing around in pasties and a thong, and I'll never forget how disgusted I felt with the way the men were groping me, but there was a sense of empowerment, and also there was a lot of money that was made. I ended up pregnant with my daughter, ended up moving to Clearwater where my mom was at that time. My father ended up going to jail for sexually abusing my siblings. So my mom had all of us, and she was constantly getting evicted from place to place. While my father was in jail, he would even tell me, Krista, you need to get your siblings to recant, because if you don't, I'm going to hang myself in here, and I'm going to kill myself, and it's going to be your fault. And so I did get my siblings to recant, although the state wasn't buying it. So he did lots of probation. He was a registered sex offender. And my father ended up passing away a little over 3 years ago with cancer and HIV. He was a gay man most of his life, and who knows if that's how he contracted, whatever, who knows how he contracted it. But I actually took him into my home with hospice and forgave him. So I just want people to know how important the power of forgiveness is. So my life was spiraling out of control at this point. That was something that was very hard on me emotionally, because I loved my dad, but I loved my siblings. At this point, due to my mom getting evicted from place to place, I entered into a strip club, and Shortly after working in that strip club, there was a girl who befriended me, started giving me drugs, which made it a whole lot easier to do what I was doing. And over a period of time, she asked me would I start driving her places. She would give me $50 to drive her, and it sounded like a great thing to do. So I didn't have to do private dances in the back room where I was constantly being assaulted every time I would go back and do a dance. Men would yank you down on them that's not what you were back there to do. So it sounded like a great deal. I started driving her. She was coming out with tons of money, and I was just getting $50. I would ask her what she was doing, and she would say dancing at bachelor parties, and I was naive. I had no idea. And over time, she started coercing me and telling me you could talk to the boss and you could make what I make. And so I took the bait and I talked to the boss, and the boss said, well, I'm going to send you to a regular and we're going to see if you're capable of making the cut. At that time, I had no idea that the girl who had befriended me was actually a recruiter for the trafficker. I ended up going to that regular, and when I walked in, he would place $250 in my hand and tell me, you need to call the boss and let them know that you're here. And I remember calling the boss and them telling me, if you don't call me within 40 minutes, then we're going to call you out and you're to meet us directly down the street to give us our part of the money. I knew that there was a whole lot more expected of me than doing a bachelor party or a private dance. So in that moment, I thought of ways that I could get away with making the cut because I was going to show them I was capable of making the cut. I was a broken girl looking for acceptance in all the wrong ways, so I was determined to make that cut. And that's how they operate. They know that you're broken, and they prey on your vulnerabilities. So I quickly thought of ways, and I did. To me, if I wasn't having intercourse, it was safe. It was my safe boundary. But I was able to get away with it that time, but that didn't always happen. Before I knew it, I was being sent out on up to 10 calls a night, and I was making a lot of money, but they were making a whole lot of money off of me. We will fast forward 3 years later, I got pregnant with my son, so I was able to break away from this boss, but I was so broken. I felt so worthless. I had crossed lines that I never thought that I would cross, and really it was the only way I knew to survive, so I went back to other bosses on my own. One boss would make me think I was his top girl and would take me to the Bahamas, but in reality he was just using me to smuggle his crack and use me as his toy once he had me over there and once he wasn't gambling. There was another boss who would take me into the strip clubs, one of the very strip clubs that we go into now, and he would have me on his arm and would be feeding me drinks and making the dancers think that, that being a high-priced escort was in some way better than what they were doing. And an escort's just a fancy word for prostitution. So without even knowing, I was now being used to recruit other girls. I lost a lot through those years. I lost my children at one point. I was highly addicted to pain pills. I was highly addicted to all kinds of drugs, and this was 20 years of my life. Towards the end, I got into the darker side called BDSM. I was working for myself at that point because the enemy started lying to me and telling me, you know what, Krista, now it's your turn to hurt them. It's your turn to belittle them. No man can hurt you anymore. And so it was 20 years of my life. And it was in that time that I decided, I had a collision with Jesus. So I was at my son's baseball game, and one of the moms asked me if I wanted to go to church, and my first thought was absolutely not. Jesus wants nothing to do with me. If I walk into that church, the church is going to burn. And I had only been to church once in my adult life, and that was for a funeral. But I was very good at playing the part, and I wanted to play the good baseball mom, so I said yes, and I entered into church, and Jesus had very different plans. I'll never forget just feeling his presence so strong. I call him Sneaky Jehovah. And yeah, I'll just never forget going in there and him completely just wrecking me in a good way. And I didn't even know what was happening, but I had accepted him into my heart, and I knew I wanted more of him. And so I was for 2 years at the church every time the doors would open. But I still was in the industry. I was scared to tell anybody my big dark secret, that in fear that they would reject me. But it was in that 2-year period that the Lord started placing on my heart that when I was out, I was going to go back in and reach women where I still was. And I didn't know what that looked like, but I just knew I was going to do it. And it was just a fire that he ignited in me that never went away. And so once I broke free from that life, I ended up creating Loving You Where You're At.
Wow.
Oh, awesome.
That's a very powerful testimony, and it's amazing what God's done in your life.
Yeah, he is amazing. It's it's even what I tell people, like, Jesus rescued me, and just even when we go into the clubs, like, we're not the rescuers, Jesus is the rescuer. So we just go love him, and Jesus does the rest.
So
His light shines right through her, don't it?
he does.
Yes,
He does.
it
So how did you meet Krista?
Well, I was a manager or a general manager of one of the clubs that the ladies would frequent once a month, and I remember the first time that the Loving You Where You Were At came in, and I literally was all about business. Everything was business, business, business. Well, they came in, and the first thing I did was literally push them out the door. Now is not a good time. They would ask me, when is a good time? I would say later. But then eventually they kept coming back, and then I just remember one night seeing them. When they walked in, the whole room lit up. Now you gotta remember, this club is full of lights. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about how their personalities came out, how Jesus came out to them, and the girls would see them. The girls would run up to them, talk to them. The whole room would light up. So that's how they came in. And then over a period of time, I was going through some hard times in my life. I had lost a son and was searching for peace. And when I would see that light, I would go, wow, that light that's shining from them is so beautiful that I would really like that light. I want that light. So I started talking to them. And of course, they always talked to all of us anyway. They would bring gifts in for the girls. They would bring in cookies in for the staff. So they were always very sweet to everybody. And then I just started talking to them. And then one time they came in, and I had been reading my Bible, seeking Jesus, and I had found at Walmart one late at night when I got off work a Jesus is Calling book, which is a devotional book. So I started reading it, and then I was so happy about it. Next time I saw them, I wanted to tell them all about it. So then just through conversations and times of them coming in, I was telling them a little bit about me and things that was going on in my life, and they were just they would listen. They would tell me that Jesus is there for me. Again, this is me approaching them. They come in and just tell the girls, when they give the girls the gifts, that they're loved, and people care about them, and Loving You Where You're At really cares about them, and it's obvious when you see it. Even from my perspective as a manager of a club, it was obvious. So, but even me, when I started reaching out for them, just I wanted to know a little bit more about them, what they do, and they came through and talked to me, and was always very positive, always very helpful. And then I remember once I was ready to get out of it. It's such a negative business for me, and then it was time for me to go. And I was looking for other ways to go out, and I got some business cards made up to be a personal trainer again. And as they were leaving to go out the door, I followed them all the way out and said, hey, I'll give you my card because next time you come, I might not be here. Well, I believe it was maybe the next month. The ladies had texted me and texted me and told me that that they had left a cookie or a brownie for me. That's what they would always give. And trust me, I really love the brownies and the cookies. I was like, whoa, that's awesome. So they told me that they left me one, and they missed me, and I told them that I was, trying to get away from it, and that I was actually left there, was having some hard times, and then by me reaching out to them, Loving You Where You're At even helped me. They had got me a gift card from Publix, and I still have that card because I remember the little thing that she wrote on it, because on the back of it she wrote, "Jesus has you." And that was the most wonderful thing that I'd ever heard. So it was just like, wow, even though I'm going through all these hard times, of course now I know we praise God through the trials that we go through because we're learning from it and things are happening for us. But at that time, I didn't know all that. You know what I mean? I just felt like everything was crashing down on me. And she wrote that one little thing, said, "Jesus has you." And that just meant so much to me. So through the period of time, I was still contacting them and was sending them pictures of the devotionals for those days. And they would respond, Krista would respond, and then I was telling them about what type of study Bible that I had, because I always had so many questions. I mean, I had tons of questions. And Krista and the ladies from Loving You Were At decided to get me a new Bible, a study Bible for men. So they met up with me, they got me the Bible, and then another devotional book, and also another book. And they were so willing to help, you know. So I did relapse back and go back into business myself because of the financial situation I was in. But those ladies were awesome for me, such a big help.
Can I add one part? Because I think this is just how the enemy will try and enslave them into this life. We had invited him to go to church, and poor guy had an hour to drive. It was his first time going to church in over 10 years. He had an hour to drive. It's pouring rain, and he gets out of the car and literally steps in an ant bed. So he literally comes into church, and he had ants in his pants. And he could have ran, he could have ran like in the other direction, but I think he ended up with like close to 30 festered like bites.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's just, that's just how much the enemy, tries to keep a hold of them, and knew that he was about to lose him, that he was breaking free.
But even on that note, going into the church, the way church that I remember it, it was always fear, pushing fear in you. When I went to church with her, I was carrying my Bible, I was dressed like I was not comfortable, and I walked in there and everyone had their hands raised, they were on stage playing music, and I was going, wow, I felt like I walked back into the 60s or something. Love Jesus. I really did. I go, wow, this is really cool. I like this. So it's just things have changed up. But she was there for me. The ladies were there for me. And it was just a tremendous help. But also just as far as me seeking and reaching out for them and for help, they were right there for me. And it was beautiful because I wanted that light. I was seeking Jesus. I wanted that light. I wanted that happiness and that vibrant light that was shining through them. That when, like you asked me the question, when I first saw them in the club, even though there's neon lights everywhere, they walked in the club, the place would light up. The girls would come around. The customers would go, well, who are they? Because the girls would just get really lit up and leave to go run to them.
They would stop on stage and be like, hey, y'all are here.
It was beautiful, yeah.
Yeah, we built some really good relationships.
Yeah, it was great.
Shows you how powerful God's love is and
Yes.
how He works through people.
Yes.
So you mentioned you were a manager. Can you share a little bit about your story and how you ended up in that?
Sure. I grew up living in the projects, moving from one apartment complex in the projects every year, changing schools every year, being real insecure. I was real small. So I was looking for something to do something. Got into sports. I didn't have a father. Of course, the coaches became my father figure, the disciplinary that I had. But during that time, that a lot of these parents don't realize the kids go through is when you're constantly getting knocked down, they tell you, get up, get up, get up, get up. So that drive, that intensity gets into you and pushes you really hard. So I started working out with weights really heavy to try to be a better football player. Because I remember when I first started, they used to have this thing that they would say on the field, and it hurt me really bad, but it motivated me to a point to where I just wanted the anger would come out. But they used to say, Red Rover, send Wimpy on over. And again, it's a cute, funny little saying, but when they're saying it about you, it really hurts,
Yeah.
So though that was one thing that was really harsh for me and hard on me to accept, basically the harshness of it to accept, but it motivated me, pushed me. So I got into weight training. I became a bodybuilder, a teenage bodybuilder. I got pretty good at it. And then as far as the bodybuilding, back in those days, there wasn't a lot of money in it, but I worked security in some clubs because I was a big kid. And then hooked up with a celebrity, I won't say who, but a celebrity that told me I needed to be a big professional wrestler. And so I kind of got into professional wrestling a little bit, and everything started getting better. I was traveling the world, making lots of money. My dreams were coming true. And then one night I had my skull cracked in India in a big riot, and about lost my eye, crushed my whole eye socket. And after that point, my life had changed. Back in 1996, it just literally had changed for me. My self-confidence went right out the window. My $1 million career is gone. I became broken. And I got this fear inside of me about losing things. Some things are always so important to you. You lose them sometimes, no matter how hard you try, you lose things. And I know we go through trials because God wants to teach us stuff. But at that point in time when you don't really know God, God's there, but you don't know him. I'm not reading the Bible. I'm not reading his word. That just sunk into me. So it became pretty hard. It still came even later on in my life when I started losing family members that were close to me. And it got to a point that where I would really have fear of losing someone. It would almost cause panic attacks. I would grab a hold of people. So these are some things that have happened to me over a period of time that that I have to still deal with. But as far as the club business, I got into the clubs working just regular security jobs when I was young because I was a big kid and the money was good. But after I had gotten injured, I was traveling all over the world, but I still knew people in the adult entertainment business, and it was good money. So, and I had an attorney friend of mine that represented me a little bit, that represented some of the clubs. So I kind of got into the clubs and started working in the adult entertainment clubs. And as sad as it may sound, I was very good at the business end of it. But until later on, when I met the ladies from Loving You Were At, I looked at things differently, and also from seeking God and seeking Jesus, and also having them to help me with certain things and helping me understand things from the woman's perspective, and obviously the dancer. It started opening my eyes, and then I remember reading one day it said that the closer you get to God, evil things despise you. So I started realizing what I was doing. I was meeting and greeting people coming into the clubs. I was patting them on the back. Oh, I'm this great business guy. Welcome to wherever you're at. Here, let me help you spend your money. Let me take you to where you need to go. And then I still feel really bad about that. That's one of the things that really hurt me the most. The biggest thing probably was taking a look at the young ladies that work there. It was something that you would hire, and actually the managers get paid from them. We get a tip out from them. So the more young ladies that work for me, guess what? The more money I make. So, but later on, after talking with Krista and her obviously being in the business before, kind of would enlighten me a little bit how it would be for the person sitting on the other side of the desk when I was hiring. So then it got to the point where, and I do have a young daughter who's 26 years old, I started looking at it as if I was hiring a young lady who's never been in the sex industry before. I'm hiring her, inviting her into this business, and I know what was going on. And there's a lot of drugs, there's a lot of stuff going on in the VIP room that shouldn't be going on.
Basically, full on
basically.
sex is going on.
And again, not to get off of that subject as far as the hiring part, but I'll elaborate on that in a second. So I would be hiring these young ladies and inviting them into that evil world. And I just finished reading 2 days ago that the closer I become to God, evil despises me. So God was changing my heart. Jesus is changing my heart this whole time. And Crystal was a word in the distance. A lady from Loving You Were At were telling, you know what I mean? Because these are questions I'm asking them. I'm reading the Bible, I'm asking them questions, so they're really helping me. So, but she helped me understand that point, so I stopped hiring all these girls. And then my bosses are going, well, wow, you're not hiring anybody anymore. What's going on? So it almost cost me my job until finally one day I just said, I've had enough. I can't.
Well, and he was intercepting. He was like giving the girls that would come
Yes.
in, like, wait,
Yes.
I think you might need these ladies. Contact these ladies.
Yeah.
So
Would have a young lady that would come in, would have a couple of kids, which tells me she needs the money because I'm not hiring them. Please, I need the money. And I said, oh, do I got somebody that you need to talk to? So, yeah, God was changing my heart.
So, can you both tell me about your relationship now?
okay, so I'll start with we are now engaged.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I promise you, I do not go in the clubs looking for club managers. That is not how it happened. But as he shared in his story, we started going in, and at first he like kind of ran us out, and then he was like, come back at this time. So I came back the next time, and there was another manager there, and she's like, no, this is a bad time. So the next month we came when she told us, and he's like, I didn't tell y'all to come at this time. So it was just finally he didn't care when we came. And I would notice God highlights some of the people more so than, I mean, everybody is just as important, but there are certain people God will highlight, and he was one of those. And I had no idea why he was so highlighted. But I can remember one night customers were trying to talk to us, and he's like, hey, leave these ladies alone, they're teaching me something. So I would just start seeing little things God was doing through him, or in him. And then the whole Jesus Calling book, and then the Bible study he would start showing. So when he left, I was the point of contact, and so we would literally start. He had a lot of questions, like he said. So it was for a while just text messages back and forth, and finally he had called about, I don't even know what, but he had called about something, and so then we started talking on the phone a lot. And over a period of and then he was going to church, and over a period of time, there were some feelings that were starting to develop, and I'm like, no, God, like, this was a manager in the club, like, I cannot do this. And God's like, why do you keep me in a box? And I was like, okay. And I was like, he's really no different from me. Like, you know, I come from that life, he's come from that life. And it was more so me still working through caring what people were going to think, or what were people going to say. And so we ended up, my birthday was coming up, and he's like, hey, and he didn't know, and he's like, hey, do you want to go to a White Snake concert with me? The date's August the 6th, because I know that your calendar's so full. And I'm like, well, that just happens to be my birthday. I'm like, I would love to go. And so he was so nervous, and I was too, but he was really nervous. So he's like, can we have a pre-date before your birthday? And I'm like, okay. So we went to a sushi restaurant for kind of like a pre-date. And he was so nervous. He's like, I was going to go in the bathroom and call you from the phone and ask you how the appetizers were. Like,
I was pacing back and forth in the
Yeah,
bathroom.
yeah.
Yes.
yeah,
I was.
neither
I was
one
so
of us
nervous.
had been in
The
any
relationship.
dating at
Yeah,
all for
neither.
many, many years.
Wow.
And so we then went to the White Snake concert, and I'm noticing that, like, my emotions are, you know, like, my feelings are growing, and I know his were as well. And then I had a busy schedule coming ahead of me. I had to go to a couple different trainings, one in New York and one in California, and he was still so newly out. And as he said, he has a hard time with losing people in his life, so he tends to grasp and hold on tight. And so at that moment, I was very busy, and I was like, it was putting more pressure on me at that time, because I was so busy and he was just freshly out. So we had some things to work through. So I said, give me some time while I'm away. And when I came back, I'm like, look, I think that we should just be friends for the time. And the ministry was growing fast, and so we became friends, and he was having a hard time with that, and so I would see him having a hard time with that. So I kind of stepped back all in all, because I didn't want to hurt him, and I didn't want to be that point of contact, because I could see that it was something that was hard for him. So some of the other ladies from the team started having him come to church, and he became very close with them, and they stayed very involved with him. And we would text occasionally, and then it just kind of got to where the text started dying out, and we weren't contacting each other as much, and there was kind of a dry period between the two of us of not really talking. And then I well, I had heard he had a relapse back to one of the clubs, and I reached out to him and I'm like, look, I said, Jesus still loves you right where you are, and we're all still here for you. We're not judging you, so don't let shame and all that get on you. Like, we're still here. And then I had posted a post on my Facebook because I'm going through trauma therapy myself, just dealing with all from my childhood and that life of being in that industry. And so he ended up responding to me, and I was like, hey, why don't you just come over? And so he did, and it was just like this brand new thing, like this brand new attraction, and there was like none of the old stuff or the old feelings that I was having. And so we just started seeing each other all the time, and over time our relationship started to progress, and then before, I don't even know, like before we knew it, like it was like, hey, you want to look for rings, or and so then he I kind of knew what was going to happen, and he took me out and had a helicopter waiting, and took me on a helicopter ride and talked the pilot into landing on a sandbar, and got out.
Talked him into letting us get out.
Yeah, to get out. So we got on the sandbar, and he's getting ready to propose, and I'm like, wait, stop right there. And I go running back to the camera, to the pilot, and I'm like, you got to take pictures of this, because
Where are you going?
you know, so it was just a God thing, completely God. It's funny how God did this, because this was the whole foundation of our relationship was Jesus, and the fact that God would use a man from that industry to be that man for me was just, it's like, look at God, I mean, that was healing in itself. Now, to tell you that we both don't have a lot of work to do would be a lie. He's got, I'm going through therapy. He's got therapy that he's going to be going through just to deal with some of his wounds, and some of the stuff that he went through just even being in that industry. But we're committed to making it work. So
I keep on saying the word powerful, but everything is just so powerful. It really is.
Praise God
And
every day.
to see how God has used your life, and has restored it. He's the great physician. He's going to completely heal everything. There's hope in that. That's incredible.
Yeah. And so he has a big desire to be a part of Loving You Where You're At. So, and we do believe that one day he will be a mighty force for the kingdom, being a part of Loving You Where You're At. Whether that's reaching the men that are in the clubs, because he knows them all. Or whether that's, us building a men's team that will, have a support group for the men who might be wanting to leave, or even the women that are wanting to leave that have boyfriends or husbands. So, God's doing something here, I don't know what all he's doing, but he's doing something here. So we're excited to see what he does. And what the future holds.
That is so
Believe and have
exciting.
faith. Yes.
Yeah.
So, Krista, going back on the topic of sex trafficking, how big of a problem is this?
It's a huge problem. We are number 3 for human trafficking. Florida's number 3. And Tampa itself, the greater Tampa Bay area, is actually has more adult registered businesses than any other county in the United States per capita. So it's huge, and the sad thing is it looks much different than the movie Taken. Actually, only 1% of cases look like that. It's usually more like the girl is sexually abused, and childhood sexual abuse usually begins at the ages of 2 and 4. She's lied to, look at what you made me do, you better not tell anyone, this is all your fault, you should be ashamed of yourself. So to escape the abuse, she runs away, and the average age of running away is between 12 and 14 years old. Within 48 hours, a trafficker usually approaches her, and then she is sold up to 10 to 40 times a night. And usually the lifespan of someone who is being trafficked is about 7 years. And I mean, they're making their trafficker a lot of money. So they're usually making about, an average trafficker's making about $250,000 annually off of one girl. So it's a huge problem because it looks much different than what anybody thinks it looks like. Nobody would have known I was being trafficked. I lived in a house with my kids, and I didn't even realize that I was being trafficked until I was at a training in 2012 to start loving you where you're at, and that's when it hit me. Like, I thought I had chosen to be a prostitute.
Wow.
And it's like that for many of the women we see. We hear things like, well, he just helps me with my money, So it's a big problem. It's happening, and I guarantee you every city. I guarantee you it's happening in your own city. I guarantee you it's happening everywhere. It's happening in your own backyard, and it's happening a lot here. We have lingerie shops, massage parlors. So many of those places we're saturated with, and that is nothing but a brothel. I used to work in one of the lingerie shops, and basically the men would come in and get their pick of the girl. We would have to give our part of the money to whoever was running it or operating it that day, and then you go to the back room and you're required to do pretty much whatever he wants for that money. So it's a huge problem.
I never thought of that. And I know you mentioned girls, but I also know boys too. There's a big area that boys are being used as well.
And boys are too. It's both boys and women. We just personally work with women. Not that we wouldn't work with a boy if we came across one. But yeah, it's happening. They don't discriminate. So there's no discrimination. And another important fact is it's not always they're snatched up. It's emotional. So the traffickers prey on the vulnerability. So when they see a 12 to 14-year-old that has ran away from home, they're going to come in and be Mr. Suave and like, hey, what's wrong? I can I'll take you in. I can get you some food for the night, and I can get you somewhere to stay for the night. So it's emotional. That's how they get them. It's more emotional than it is let's snatch them up, throw them in a van, and take them away. That does happen, but it's more emotional.
Thinking about this entire situation, you would think there would be a more obvious plan to stop it. But the reality is it goes deeper than just the girls on the street.
Right.
I mean, you're dealing with people in the political scene as well.
Yes.
Right?
So we had a girl that we were helping, and she had been trafficked her whole life, and she actually was made to have a hysterectomy because she was going to be sold to a senator for a period of time. And so for quality control, she was made to have a hysterectomy. So it's a big problem. People have their, big people, police officers, not all. We have great police officers and we have great politicians,
Right.
But there are some very high up people who have their hands into this money. So it's a bigger problem than anyone thinks. I actually just watched the Whistleblower movie last night, and that is based on a true story, and it was about the United Nations trafficking girls, and they were actually a part of the trafficking. I would recommend watching that movie.
Wow.
So it's a huge problem.
Speaking of trafficking real fast, you mentioned previously outside of this about people even going to churches and schools.
Oh,
to
okay,
traffic.
so yes. So the same girl that I was sharing with about the senator, she was actually bought by somebody for, I believe it was like $20-something thousand, and he would take her in and have her be a part of the worship team to try and lure girls and try and recruit girls out of the church itself, right inside the church. Yes.
Wow.
That's crazy. So what can the church and others do to help this horrific crime?
I think for the church needs to talk about it more.
Right.
Thankfully, the church that I'm involved with, they talk about it, and we're partners with them. So, but I will tell you, back when I was in the industry for those 2 years and I was going to church, it wasn't talked about then. And I think if somebody would have talked about it, I would have felt that it was a safe place to be able to open up and come let somebody know what was going on. So I think first and foremost, they need to talk about it. I think that because these girls, we are bringing them to church. These precious women is what I like to call them, because they're daughters of a king. And when we're bringing them to church, they might not be dressed like we're dressed right now. You know, they're dressed how they know to dress. They don't think they're dressed in any wrong way. So if someone comes in and they don't look like what you might think they should, don't run over to them and try and cover them up or make them feel judged for what they're wearing, because if so, you've lost them, because they already feel like I felt, that Jesus wants nothing to do with them. And it's already one of the hugest steps for them to step into that church in the first place. So just embrace everyone who's coming in, because you never know which one of those girls or which one of those boys might be someone who's either being trafficked or working in the commercial sex industry.
So what if there's somebody watching you today who is caught up in the sex industry or being trafficked? What would you tell them?
I just want them to know that there is hope. I know it feels hopeless, and I know you feel like God has abandoned you, and maybe you even question if there is a God. But I want you to know that He is pursuing you. I want you to know that you are loved. I want you to know that you are strong, and I want you to know that you are a warrior. There are people like myself and many other organizations that are out there fighting for you. So don't give up. There are people who love you who don't even know you. There are people who are fighting for you that don't even know you. And you have a God, you have a Father who loves you so much, and He is pursuing you, and He is sending help without you even knowing it. So just know that you are loved, you are valued, and you are purposed, and just hold on to that hope, because there is a way out. I'm living proof of 20 years in that life and was able to get out.
So how can a viewer contact you?
They can do it one of two ways. We have a website, which is www.lovingyouwhereyouareat.com. I know it's a long name, but it's all spelled out. And then we also have a Facebook page. So it would just be Facebook with a /LYWYAA. So just the acronym for Loving You Where You Are At. And there you'll find information as far as emails, phone numbers, all kinds of information on the website. So
Perfect.
If I told you my story, you would hear hope.
even though I had my encounter with Jesus and I was in the church for the 2 years, the final thing that really got me out is, for one, bringing it to the light. So I ended up doing a Google search one night of women who love Jesus but are in the sex industry. And lo and behold, this organization called Treasures out of California came up. And I had a spot that said Industry Girls, click here. So I did, and they set me up with a mentor, and that mentor was the first Christian that I was really able just to open up to and let it all out to. Within a month's time, she had encouraged me to go in and tell one of my pastors. And I did. And his response was, Jesus loves you, we love you, and we're going to walk with you through this season of your life. And what the final thing was, and I think this is important for everybody to know, that really freed me is I love Joyce Myers. I watched her like every day during those 2 years. Once I had come to know Jesus, I went to volunteer at one of her conferences, and she was telling the story of the prodigal son. And at that moment, when she was telling that story, I could audibly hear God and see him say, come on, Krista, you can do this. I love you. So it was in that moment that I knew I loved Jesus, but in that moment, I had a revelation of his love for me. So really what freed me was once I had a revelation of how much he loved me. And I did. I came home and I left that industry with $70 to my name. So I think that's important. Many of us, we love Jesus, but I really pray that everyone that hears this will get a revelation of his love for them, because that's the game changer.
That is greater than all.